Hey everybody, I'm Michelle.
And I'm Julie, and we're here today with a new episode for you, and the episode is called Let That Shit Go.
Lots of it.
Lots of it. This is actually a topic that might be a little complicated to unpack, but we're going to give it a shot. So going into the new year, as we have now, Michelle, we are already almost a month into the new year. When this episode drops, it'll be mid-February.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's really crazy. And it's funny because when you get into the new year, you think a lot about what am I going to do differently? What am I going to do better? What am I going to let go of? And as you get further along into the month, you kind of start forgetting.
Yeah. New you, new who?
Yeah, exactly. So we just want to keep it on the forefront. And this topic is actually kind of interesting because there are so many things that we hold on to as human beings that really hurt our heart, and we don't let them go. And there's a lot of reasons why that happens. It could be romantic relationship. It could be a family bond, friends, whatever, work-wise. There's so many things that we let control our emotions and I think directly impact how we make decisions and what we do.
Wow, everything you just said, there's like so many things.
I know. Well, where do you want to start?
Let's start with the family aspect.
Okay. You had mentioned in another podcast that we had recorded, and we talked about this a little bit, that our backgrounds are pretty religious. Yours more than mine. I would say the family dynamic that you grew up in and the rules and construct was pretty strict, it sounds like. So when you hear the word forgiveness, when you hear that word, what do you think?
I think it's not a bad word. I don't want it to seem like it's a bad word because actually forgiveness itself is a very good thing. And I think it's really important in a lot of the things that we do as far as when we're saying let shit go. But yes, having been raised in that kind of religious environment, forgiveness, when I hear that word, I tend to relate it to that, which really is kind of unfortunate because it doesn't really need to be in regard to the religion. Forgiveness on its own is really a beautiful thing.
It really is. And it is actually a lot harder to achieve than one might think. I mean, you may feel like you've let something go or you've, forgiven someone or a circumstance or situation and, you see it rearing its ugly head, later on in life, or if you run across a person that, you thought you'd forgiven or whatever. I think it just takes the bandage off and might rip wounds open, or at least I feel like it's been that way for me.
For certain circumstances too, not necessarily even seeing that person, if it could be something totally different that brings back those feelings. A lot of times, you say forgive and forget, and you think, just like you were saying, you think you've forgotten, but then something happens, or even you're somewhere and a circumstance or situation brings those feelings back, and it's all of a sudden like, whew.
I know.
Not forgotten.
Not forgotten. And I truly believe that forgiveness, like Michelle said, is a pretty beautiful thing, and really is something where you have to have a real look inside your heart and allow yourself the opportunity to let something go, because you're really doing it more for yourself in a lot of respects than you are for that person. So when I think from a religious perspective, or, growing up, when we were asking for forgiveness, we were going to confession, we were doing things like that. You were asking for forgiveness from a divine source, and you were granted that forgiveness for that reason. But there were other circumstances that didn't have anything to do with religion that I believe when you put that word out there, it might have a little bit of a different connotation, or maybe not. I don't know.
I don't know. As you were just talking, though, that could be a whole other episode.
Here we go again.
Yeah, with the religion, and when you were talking about confession and you're doing it to a person, I don't know, I just thought of like a million other things. So
yeah, well, it's different. You're asking for God's forgiveness, right? So we're not getting into a religious episode, you guys.
No, we're not.
Don't worry, we're not going down that road, but we both have those backgrounds. So in preparation for this episode, we've been talking about this a lot. And really, as we've gotten older too, you realize there's things that you've not let go go of, or you thought you'd let go of them. And one thing Michelle had said earlier, she go, well, you could let it go, just ghost it. You know, people ghost stuff. They just stop talking to people, or they just disappear. And instead of dealing with something, that's their way of dealing with it. And that's not necessarily good either. I mean, we're all guilty of that. I know I am. So
I think part of you were talking earlier about, you know, when you think of letting things go, you have to free it. When you say that, it makes me think of freeing up space inside of us for other things to fill up the space. You've got to let all that, if it's bad stuff, whatever it is you're feeling you need to forgive or forget or let go. Once you do that, it's going to open up space inside you because there's something else ahead.
Right.
You know, as you're moving forward.
So like an example, this isn't my personal example, but an example I could think of is if you have, say, a child who was treated really poorly by their parent when they were young. Maybe they were physically abused or something. And they've grown up with that. And as they've gotten older and matured, they have forgiven their parent for what had happened to them. But I doubt they've forgotten.
Oh, absolutely not. They haven't forgotten.
So I think that there's a lot of value to forgiving or letting things go, because you're really serving yourself when you do that. But I don't necessarily know that forget is something that you'd want to do too, because you don't want to repeat the same problems again. So not being vindictive or anything like that, just more kind of like, I forgive you, I forgive the situation, but I definitely don't want to be a part of that again, so I'm moving on. That's how I look at it.
It's interesting too. I don't know. I just think about that example that you used, and I don't know if that's something that can be forgiven necessarily. Not having, walked in those footsteps. It's a hard one to even think about, but yeah.
Well, I've seen that with people, not myself, but seen that with people where one of the parents was abusive to a child, and I don't forgive that parent.
Right.
I mean, they weren't abusing me, and I wasn't the child, but I can see what damage was done to a child, and I don't forgive them. And so, will I ever? I don't know. I think you get to the point where you're having to forgive, like I was saying to someone the other day, you have to forgive their ego, because that's what a lot of it is. And you have to forgive their ignorance or their insecurity or whatever it is that brought them to the point where they were cruel or inhumane or, rude or whatever it was to someone, because that all comes from other stuff that we aren't even going to unpack here today. It's stuff that they, carry with them, and we all have our stuff, but that I think that I've had a hard time with that too. So we always talk about you need to be more forgiving, because when you're forgiving, you let things go, and when you let things go, then like you were talking about, you have more room in your heart. But I think it's a lot easier said than done. Absolutely easier said than done. But if you're in a position where you don't let things go, then you carry them with you. And I think I know people that are older, even older than us now, and it makes them kind of ugly. Negative, nasty Nellies. That's what you turn into if you carry all that baggage. That song by Erykah Badu. Yeah. Bag Lady. Carrying all those bags, you're going to hurt yourself. You got to let that shit go. So as I was thinking that through, like I was talking about a minute ago, a person who I feel like they never let it go, and it was so ugly. You could just feel it when you were around them, that vibration that they had and the anger that they had that was really it really manifested itself in so many different things. This level of mistrust and not treating people right and just angry and sarcastic about it all the time. And, that's a hard way to live your life, and to die that way. To die that way and not have any resolution for yourself sounds really sad. Yeah, it does sound sad. Unfortunately, not everybody knows how, and they don't have the environment or the circumstances or the emotional capabilities to be able to even understand that they're going through that. Yeah. So I've kind of tried to look at this as a way for me to take a deep breath, inhale, and then exhale, like literally inhale and exhale, and just be able to say, I release whatever it is. It doesn't always work. Okay, let's just be real. It doesn't always work, but at least it's something to try, because, one of the most, I think, courageous decisions that you could ever make for yourself is finally letting go of something that will hurt your soul. And I think that there's a newfound peace when you're able to do that. Negative thoughts and things that can consume you. And like I was mentioning, the person that was so angry it made her ugly, and she's now passed. And it's sad because she let all that stuff literally eat her up, eat her soul up, and stand in judgment of other people. She was standing in judgment of other people and things that had happened in the past and all that. And it really just ruined her her life, the rest of her life.
You got to be able to draw a line. I think it's really important to be able to draw that line, and sometimes it can seem scary to pass that line. When
you say draw the line, what do you mean exactly?
Draw a line in the sand. I guess I should be more clear. Draw a line in the sand. When you make a decision that you're going to move forward and let go of a person, a situation, circumstance, whatever it might be, because of the hurt and if there's been pain. So being able to make the decision that you're going to move forward. And I guess when I say draw a line in this, it's that hard. It's almost like literally making that decision. And you're going to cross over that and move forward, Yeah,
that line has been kind of the way you've kept yourself protected, more than likely. I know I can think of a couple of different situations in my adult life where I've had people that I was close to and that I've made a really conscious decision to not have in my life. It's not that they're bad people necessarily. It's just that their goals and maybe their values and the things that were important to me at the time were not necessarily things that were important to them. And when I say it didn't serve me, I don't mean it in an egotistical way.
Okay, queen.
Okay, queen. I don't mean it in an egotistical way. I just mean it's like it didn't help me be a better person, I guess. And I also want to note that I have actually been that person for other people too. And I acknowledge that because I can think of a time not that long ago, I guess, in my adult life where my family was in crisis. I was in crisis, and the days were low, dark days, really super low vibration. And there were people that I thought were my friends, or that would be people that I could lean on a little bit, that basically ghosted me, or just exited, stage left, and were not there. And so, maybe this is something that they were doing. They were just removing me from their life because for a lot of different reasons, they didn't want to deal with it, or they didn't feel like it was necessary, or it was just too much.
Even though that was hard at the time, do you feel like in some ways it strengthened you?
Yeah, I do think
Looking
about
back,
it.
Yeah.
It makes me realize a couple of different things. I thought that we were closer than we were. In my mind, maybe we were not as close as well, they thought we weren't as close or whatever. But also, I've just kind of let it go because I don't have any ill will towards them or anything like that. I know that going through really tough times, you can be a different person, and you're in fight or flight mode a lot of the time. They may not even know that. And so they chose to leave, and that's okay. Now it's okay. I'm fine with it. It's been years. Would I want to be friends with them again? I don't know. We're in completely different places probably in our lives, and probably wouldn't even be a valuable friendship. So who knows? But I wouldn't go out of my way to seek them because I thought I had before.
It makes me think about when I was going through some really hard things in my family. And, you were talking about maybe they didn't want to be around you because of what you were going through and how you were being at the time.
Right.
And I could see that with myself when I look back. I was probably that person because I didn't have a lot of positive things in my life going on. And so I probably wasn't the most positive person to be around.
So you're exuding negativity, you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see that. The other thing too to think about is as human beings, we bring all of these patterns, negative thinking patterns and things that we have in our head from being little, even when we were little and growing up, that it's really hard to break some of those cycles. And you see it with families, I think, a lot. I definitely see things in my family. I see things in other people's families and stuff too, because those dynamics, you're going to be your worst a lot of the time around your family. And so the fears and stressors and things that you bring, they are not necessarily things that belong to us, but they're patterns of behavior that have manifested through, say, generations.
Jesus, all those behaviors, those generational curses.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. there's one situation I'm thinking of right now that is kind of on the forefront in my mind where I just want people to get, I know I sound like Rodney King. I just want people to get along. It's really true. He wanted people to get along then
Live
too.
and let live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had one person say to me when we were talking about how to combat some of these problems a few weeks ago, and she said, this is a lot about ego. People can't get past their ego and be able to just see another human the way they are. They're upset with how they feel and aren't necessarily thinking about what's going on with the other
so
person.
True.
Yeah.
That's so true.
So as a result, people, they grow apart or they choose not to spend time together. And as we get older, it's kind of sad because you're missing out on so much if you hold and harbor all of this ill will and resentment towards another person.
I think compassion and empathy come into play.
Yeah.
When, what you're talking about, you have to be able to open your heart really to see what that other person might be going through. I mean, you and I were in retail for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And so working with the public like that, and people can be nasty. That's just on a not even a personal level.
Yeah.
It's just in a transactional relationship.
Well, they're having a bad day and they get to be smart mouthy to the person behind the cosmetic counter.
Yeah. And it's just, I don't know what made me think of that, but you would hear that a lot in retail. You never know what kind of day somebody's had. So.
And it's kind of true. I mean, even like you have a kid that comes home and they're being a little brat, they could have been bullied that day and treated poorly or felt like they'd been treated unfairly or whatever. And it's like, they don't necessarily understand how to let some of that stuff go because it's happening right there and then to them. So the other thing too, I was thinking about when it comes to letting shit go was control. And this has nothing to do with forgiveness or anything like that, but it has to do with control and being able to control your environment or control the things that are going on around you. And as a result, maybe having a tremendous amount of anxiety or feeling overly responsible for something because you're not allowing other people to get involved and to do their part. That could be in a work situation or, it could be at a home situation too, but you're only one person, right? So if you have something that's going on and you're not involving other people, a project, whatever, because you're kind of a control freak. I'm not saying that with...
No, everybody, you have to understand, I'm sitting here listening to Julie going,
really? Okay, I have tendencies. I'm not even going to lie.
She knows she does. It's not a bad thing. Yeah.
It can be. It can be. I mean, I've learned to let a lot of things, go and say, okay, I'm just going to bless and release it. That's my thing. I got that from somebody when I was at Nordstrom.
She knows she's bossy.
Yeah, I can be bossy. And there's a couple people that are going to be listening to this that are going to have a big chuckle and an eye roll. Thanks, Michelle.
I'm shaking my head in up and down yes as she's confirming.
Yeah, this is all about being real, right?
Yeah.
So if I said that never happened, I'd be the big fat liar.
I think, though, we all, in some way, whether we're a control freak, if you will, I think in some ways we all try to control situations, especially those situations that are coming into play with regard to forgiveness or letting something go. We get kind of controlling in that manner because we're trying to control our emotions and how we're feeling and in some ways what the other person is doing,
And how do you tell when you're ready to let something go? How do you know?
I don't think you know. I think it's a journey.
Yeah.
I think letting go is a journey. I know we started, I said let's start with families, but I mean, what else is there in regard to forgiveness or letting shit go besides situations with your family?
And your family is so important, obviously, such a big, massive part of your life. That's probably one of the most complicated in a lot of ways, the dynamics within a family and where you sit in the pecking order, with your siblings, for example, and how you're viewed by your parents and how you're compared to your siblings and things like that. All of that plays into it,
Yeah. So what else? Relationships?
Yeah, I would say relationships. That's always a fun one. Oh, goodness gracious.
There's a lot there, isn't there?
That's a big old suitcase. But I've thought about that a lot too, because people can hurt you, and we've all been hurt, right? We've all had people in our lives that betrayed us or that we trusted and really let us down, that sort of thing. And how do you get past that? And how do you put yourself first? If you remain in a relationship, say, with a person who doesn't really take you into consideration with the things that they're doing, then really is that a good place for you to be? And so you can remove yourself from from the situation, but does that mean that you let it go? Not necessarily. It takes a long time, I think, to do that and to be able to forgive someone's actions.
I think as people are listening to what you're saying, everybody's going to have a different scenario in their head with what they're relating to that. I was listening to you thinking about when I went through divorce.
Yeah.
And I also, though, was thinking about friendships that have had the same.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I think that's a tough one because letting things go could mean that you remain in that situation and things will, it's like a cycle, you know, the same betrayal, the same lies, whatever it is, they're going to come full circle again if they happened once before. So letting things go means you could stay in that situation and the situation continues to go full circle and do the same thing. So you aren't necessarily, you might be forgiving, you might be letting things go, but are you doing it because you genuinely believe that? Or are you doing that because it's the easier thing to do and the cycle continues when you're in a relationship?
as I was listening to you, I was thinking it's not the easier thing to do. That's hard as you know what to do that.
Hard as fuck.
Yeah. Because you almost have to continue to move through it, sometimes in a robotic way, depending on what the situation is. Sometimes you're just going through the motions and doing what is best to protect yourself. And until you get through some of that and over that line that you drew, back to what I was talking about before.
Yeah.
Once you cross that line and get through it, you can start to kind of open up a bit and maybe find little openings where you start to let some of it go. But again, it's definitely a journey.
So basically you're saying you can let the cycle repeat itself when someone is not good to you as you're processing it and trying to figure out another plan.
I know that's what I did. Sometimes you have to. It's not, it's situational.
I agree. Yeah, that actually does make sense. If you're in a position where you're open to letting something go, you are giving yourself the opportunity to take a really big load off your shoulders. And that's the thing to me that sounds so appealing because we have a lot of things on our shoulders, right? Letting something go doesn't necessarily mean, like I said before, that you forget. It just means that you're not going to let it capture your thoughts, you know, on a regular basis. For that reason, you can focus more on you and increasing your own self-awareness, I guess. And that means you can increase your own self-awareness through your own self-exploration and practicing self-care.
And I know that our last episode, I talked a little bit about words of affirmation.
Yes.
And affirmations. And how when I started my journey on my own, that comes into play where you start having to do, I know I did anyways, you start having to do some of that to talk yourself through it.
It's like self-talk.
Yes. You know, I am worthy, never settle. You know, those are big ones for me.
Yeah.
And, you know, you have to continually remind yourself on a daily basis as you're working through. And once you gain confidence through a lot of the activity of that, it makes it a little bit easier and it becomes more aware that you are able to forgive and move on and start forgetting somewhat. We never forget.
No. When I've seen, and I can't think of a specific example, maybe it was on Law and Order, I don't know, but you see where, you know, people have been in these situations where someone maybe in their family or someone they love is treated poorly, and the person in that family, that mom or dad or whatever, has the ability to be so revengeful and they choose not to. And it's so interesting to me because they've gotten to that point where they are allowing their grace to take over and replace their anger and replace their venom and everything. And I think that is a pretty amazing thing that people, if they're able to do that. I'm not that person, at least not initially. I think it takes me a long ass time to process something and be able to let something go, which I wish wasn't the case. But I mean, that's the reality of who I am. Has it gotten better? I think it has, you know, over the years, and things that I was so adamant about, you know, maybe I'm not so adamant about anymore. Maybe it wasn't such a big deal. Like I remember when, okay, maybe this isn't the best idea, but one of my children, will not say which one, was caught smoking weed. And I just thought it was the end of the earth. I
know which one. Because I think one of my kids was probably with them.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually.
Just kidding.
Just kidding. I was so angry. And a lot of it, I remember thinking of course, internalizing is how pissed off I was at myself. Oh, you're such a bad parent. I can't believe you didn't know. And I look at this now and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I had that reaction the way that I did. Was that the best way to respond?
Same. I think of many situations where I freaked out.
Yeah. Remember, I had to call you at work. I had to call her at work and tell her what was going on. So we both got to freak out together.
I was mortified.
Yeah.
Mortified. But as you were talking about moving through things with grace, and you were talking about replacing it with grace, I just started thinking, replace it with grace.
Yeah.
It's got to be the case. Oh, yeah.
Did you make that rhyme up?
I did.
I thought that was pretty good. Are you going to put some beats with it?
Yeah, maybe next time, next episode.
Maybe the next episode. We decided that we were going to have an episode where if something comes up that's in a song, and my family knows this, it's like I break out in song.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like a word comes up, I start singing. It's kind of silly, but
I do the same thing.
yeah, it's kind of fun. So
girls just want to have fun.
Girls just want to have fun. Okay, you don't need to hear me. I'm bad at karaoke.
Not this episode.
Yeah. Anyway, I think when we're talking about letting things go or forgiveness, I guess, whichever verbiage you choose to use, when we do that, we're doing ourselves a benefit. So we're saying, okay, we're going beyond the past. We're going beyond what has debilitated us in the past. And we do that for ourselves. We're not doing it for that person. We're doing it for ourselves. So I read this phrase that forgiveness is like emotional hygiene.
Oh,
it's
I like that.
Yeah, it's like cleansing yourself, really.
I really like that.
I thought that was kind of an interesting way to put it.
Emotional hygiene.
Emotional hygiene. You're carrying the past into the present moment, and that's killing your vibe for the present moment, right? So by releasing something and letting it go, you actually are giving yourself the benefit, like you said before, to be happy.
Say that again. An emotional
hygiene
cleanse. Yeah. I was like, an emotional cleanse.
It's an emotional cleanse.
It's kind of the same.
It's not a liver cleanse. It's an emotional cleanse. Don't do a liver cleanse, you guys. That's like not good.
That's dry January. But some of the things, though, that we've made reference to, you talk about that emotional cleanse. When we talked about letting things go, how it opens up space. It's all of those things. It makes it lighter, not heavy, more open than closed.
I feel like it makes it sunshiny. Like you're lighter on your feet, you're kind of elevated. There's my word. Elevated yourself. Yeah, to the next level. You've kind of risen above whatever it is. So you don't do that and you bring your past into the present moment. It just makes you...
It drags you down.
Yeah, makes you unhappy. And it's like that term low vibration. You become a really low vibration person. I know people like that are low vibration. And then I know people that are the polar opposite and are, as someone in my family would say, toxically positive. Whoa. Because they never say anything negative. And I'm like, leave them alone, They're happy. That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
But if you don't let stuff go, it does limit you. And a lot of that is, and this is what I've had to kind of come to grips with, I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, is your ego. You can't get past your ego. And your ego is what keeps you angry, because your anger is almost like your way of protecting yourself, or your way of saying, I am better than this, or I deserve better than this. And it's something that if you can't let it go, you just continue saying the same thing. You're repeating the same cycle. Like that family member I said earlier that ended up dying like that. And her personality had turned so ugly.
Somebody close to me once told me I needed to be humble.
Really?
Yeah.
I feel like you are humble.
Yeah. But it just made me think of that as you were talking about ego. I guess, being humble has to do with not letting that ego take over.
Right. Yeah, that's very true.
And it was actually during a time when I was kind of gaining my self-confidence and coming more into my own.
And people weren't used to seeing you that way.
People were not used to seeing me that way. I was very...
passive.
Was I?
Yeah, sweet.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Passive, quiet.
That stacked hairdo was like... That stacked hairdo you had was like all the rage.
But I wasn't.
I mean, I wouldn't have messed with you.
Yeah.
You looked like you meant business.
Yeah.
I'm totally teasing you.
I heard that all the time, though, at work.
Really?
Yes. I'm like, really?
You didn't have resting bitch face or anything.
No, I didn't. That's why it was.
The girlfriend had the hair to die for, and the nails, and the make. I mean, that girl.
Yeah, back in the day.
Back in the day. That's right. Anyway, to wrap this up, I think what's important to really think about as you're kind of going through your year and kind of preparing yourself for the next whatever that's coming up for you is thinking about, what is weighing you down? What is the topic, or who is the person that is dimming your light? And how can you take control? Okay, maybe that's not the right word, but how can you embrace that situation and try to make it better for you? Not worrying about anybody else. You got to be a little bit selfish on this topic, I think, but really trying to make it better for you so you can move forward, so you can be the best version of yourself.
Absolutely. I think it's important to write things down. I'm a big advocate of that. I'll just put my 2 cents in.
Like in a journal?
Journaling, just writing things down that you are wanting to see happen.
So manifesting it.
Yeah, manifesting.
So saying it in a way where it manifests. This will happen. I will make this happen, that kind of thing.
Yep.
What else did you want to share?
I just want to share that if it's something that you have been struggling with, take a look at what all you have in that suitcase, sister. Unpack some of that stuff and just make it a carry-on.
Because it really sucks to have to pack a bag and check it in, especially if you're going to a place where all you need is your bathing suit and a pair of shorts, right?
But yeah, just make your load lighter. Think about what some of the things are that you can release and let go. Start out small. It doesn't have to be a big thing, even if it's just one small thing a day.
I think that's wonderful advice. Well, this is what we have for you guys this week, and we look forward to hearing your feedback. And we will be back next week with more episodes to unpack.
Until then,
see you soon.